Hi, I'm Dr. Lois Linden, and today our topic is qualitative research standards, or sometimes referred to as data quality measures. Most of the time we will consider a lot of detail in Chapter 3, and one of the final things that we need to plan for when developing our Chapter 3 is what standards or evaluation measures will we incorporate to ensure the quality of the data we're planning. Now, Chapter 10 of Creswell's text gives you some background into this, but we are going to talk about a few of these things in a little more specifics, and then talk about those things that are expected regarding research at College of St. Mary. So we can use the term either data quality measures, or as the textbook talks about, qualitative research standards. But either way, we want to make sure that we do have quality when we're looking at the data and managing the data for the final product of our research study in a qualitative manner. Now, this is very different than quantitative data standards. They talk about reliability and validity, and that's generally related to numbers, although we know that there can be some content validity, which of course can also be used for qualitative research. But they are a little more prescriptive and a little better understood and have a longer history. But our goal is still the same. We want to make sure that we're still finding the truth and that we have the quality that we say we would want in a good research study. However, there's always kinds of controversy regarding the qualitative research standards or data standards. Lots of different authors have various viewpoints on this, and you'll see that Creswell explains that quite well. And so what we are saying to you is that it doesn't matter necessarily which standards that you use, although they can be different ones that apply more appropriately to the different traditions. But you want to make sure that you have a plan, and that you detail that in Chapter 3, and that you cite the sources that you're using to support whatever tools or standards you are applying for your own qualitative study. One of the key words that historically has been used, and maybe not so much these days, regarding quality standards for qualitative research is trustworthiness. And in the past, trustworthiness has had four major components: credibility, or which sometimes is looked at as the validity piece in a quantitative study; transferability; dependability, more the reliability aspect of a quantitative study; and then confirmability. And we're going to talk briefly about all four of those. And they have a lot of detail under each of them, or many of them, but we're really going to describe those. And I'm not concerned about if you use these four terms as much as that you use the pieces of them that we're going to talk about in detail when you cite what type of quality standards you're going to be using. So the first component under trustworthiness is credibility. And one of the things that applies to qualitative research is that as a researcher, you have prolonged engagement both with the participants and or with the data. And that there's also many times some observation, and that you're making field notes. And this can be if you're videotaping something, if you're doing a direct observation, if you're doing an interview, you're going to want to take some notes and make sure that you are documenting what you see as well as the words that you hear. But prolonged engagement means spending quality time with both the participants and or the data itself. One of the pieces that we find most common in qualitative research as far as a quality measure is triangulation. And in my simplistic view of triangulation, it just means that there's multiple sources of data. And so let's say you're going to do an interview as your primary source of data gathering. but you would also have field notes, and you could look at the literature and see what it says. But maybe also you're asking for some other piece of information from the participants. Maybe it's a document or a photograph, or you have them draw a picture, or you videotape it and watch for the nonverbal things, so that you're looking at more than one data source. And that's what the term triangulation means. And triangulation is a really strong way of having some data validity or credibility for your research. Triangulation, as we've alluded to, can be from multiple sources of data, or it can be multiple individuals collecting the data so that you have more than one person's viewpoint as the data is being collected. Or it can be triangulating the theory, that you have multiple perspectives. So let's say you're doing Bandura and constructivist theory, and you're really looking at then if you're doing skills at the novice to expert theory as far as skill development, so that you're really looking at lots of different perspectives, and you're looking at the relationship and interpretation of those theories. And then the method that you use, as we've sort of talked about, that you're maybe doing the observation and interviews, so that you have multiple methods of gathering the data. Or sometimes there'll be people that do an online survey for a larger group of people, and then they ask for participants who would be willing to be interviewed, and maybe they do then a purposive selection of those, maybe those that are on the extremes, the pros and cons, so that they actually can get a more in-depth interview related to them. So they're using various methods in that instance. So these are some of the possible ways of triangulating the data and establishing credibility. Now there's other ways of doing credibility, and that can be some different ways of checking the data. So a peer debriefing or an audit trail, and for student research we use audit trails. So I'm going to talk about those a little separately. So if you're doing research after your dissertation, you would be able to do peer debriefing, where you would have a peer come and look at the data and maybe the themes that you have coded, and they would validate that, or they would check that what you had identified as themes fit with what the original data showed. So that they would sort of confirm that. The same thing for as an audit trail. At CSM, we talk about an audit trail being when the doctoral committee chair or a faculty member does the same thing. They look at your data, and then they look at the themes that come from that data, and then they say that it's logical that those themes would be the result of the original data. A second way of doing an external check is having the members or the participants go back and actually look at the transcript and or the themes that have been coded from your data. So you can ask the participants, even a sampling of the participants, to sort of double check that what they said is logical. And once in a while someone will come upon something and they'll say, oh, that sort of reminds me though, this would be an addition. And so that way they're adding to the data. Another way of doing credibility is searching for disconfirming evidence. And I have to confess that really this is not something that I have typically seen or typically use or advise people to do. But let's say that there is some disagreement and there's conflicting accounts either with the literature. You would want to delve into that and talk about that. Then another way of establishing credibility is the researcher credibility. So that's you as the researcher. Since you are a tool in qualitative research, then it's important that you have the experience and the expertise through the coursework that you've done, the other research that you've done, establishing if you're using a particular tool or instrument that that you know how to use it. So what are your qualifications? Also maybe that you have taught or that you have experience in the topic that you're researching, and your credentials. And then bracketing. And bracketing is a way that you establish if you have some experience already or ideas already about the topic and what those experiences or ideas might be. So it's really establishing, okay, I might have a bias or an opinion related to this because of my past experiences, and you're going to make some notes or memos regarding that so that you're establishing, okay, this is what I'm currently thinking, but I'm not going to let that influence what my research participants say to me. I am not going to impart my beliefs or my experiences on the findings, and that's called bracketing. And that, as a researcher, is a really important thing, and it's probably one of the things we expect students to do as much as anything. So that's an important way of establishing credibility, so that you're not imposing your concepts about the topic or phenomena on the study. So those are the credibility, different ways that we establish credibility. Then there are dependability. And one of those is, this is similar to the reliability that we would see in quantitative research. And there are a couple of different ways we can do that. We can do, if there's teams, they can compare their data, and that would be looking at like split half. So the teams can actually both compare the data and the way they did the data gathering and the data that they compiled to make sure that they're getting quality data, or they can do the same thing when they're looking at the actual coding and the themes. How comparable, how alike, and how different are they? And then also inter-rater reliability. There's a student who is currently in research proposal, and she is planning to have some adjunct faculty doing some of the evaluation of the students during their simulations. And they'll be doing an evaluation of those students both for the course but also then for her research. And so we've discussed having them do some videotaping and doing some testing of that evaluation, both so that they have quality evaluation methods for the courses and for the student evaluations, but also for her research study. So that would be establishing some inter-rater reliability, that the data you're evaluating or analyzing comes up with similar results. And then an inquiry audit is similar to what we talked about under the peer debriefing or the audit trail, where someone does an audit. And you just think about this: if you have financial books and you want to make sure you have a financial audit, it's similar. Is that is somebody that's maybe unfamiliar with the actual research study, not necessarily with the content, but the actual research study, able to do an audit for you. And then that same thing can apply to the confirmability, that they then not only do they do the audit to say, yes, this is a dependable way that the process has been done, but then the outcomes, the data itself, the data analysis piece has been confirmed. And then transferability is the final piece of the trustworthiness, the fourth leg of the trustworthiness. And this means is it generalizable. Now, lots of qualitative studies we say have small numbers and it's not generalizable. So in this way we're saying not is it because it has huge numbers generalizable, but is it the data specific enough and detailed enough that a consumer, a different reader of your study could say, yes, this fits my environment and would be likely to be similar results in my setting. And then the other piece about transferability is the data thick and rich enough that it makes it understandable to your audience. So you have a theme, you describe what the theme is or sort of define it, and then you offer the quotes from the participants that fit it so much that it's like, oh yes, that's exactly what that means to me too. And so they're more likely to feel like it's very valid information when it makes sense to them, that the quote from the actual participant fits the theme in such a clear way that it makes sense. So those are some of the key things to data quality. I would say that in summary, the ones that we see used most often are triangulation, seeing that there's different sources or methods of gathering the data, bracketing for personal bias to be avoided so that people write these things down and put them in their file and refer to them on occasion to make sure that they are not imposing their own thoughts and views and experiences on the study itself. And then another one is that audit trail or member check, where they go back and have other people look at the data. The audit trail, the chair of the committee or a faculty member can do, and the member check is going back to the participants themselves. So those are probably the main ones that we see used, but it depends on the type of tradition that you're going to choose, as well as the participants in the setting, and what you decide for yourself meets the data quality standards or the data quality measures that you want to incorporate into your study. So I wish you well. It is important in Chapter 3 that you add the plan that you have for meeting data quality standards. Thank you so much.